What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Clara Bow, the untold truth of Hollywood's first it girl. Most movie buffs have heard the phrase Hollywood's newest it girl used to describe the industry's hottest ingenue, but even die-hard cinephiles might not be acquainted with the fascinating personal history of Clara Bow, the silent film star who inspired the term. Born in a Brooklyn tenement at the turn of the 20th century, Clara Bow was an unlikely leading lady. Her childhood was defined by poverty, abuse, and loss, and she had no connections in the film or theater worlds to give her a leg up. What she did have going for her, though, was plenty of talent, determination, and beauty, and she used all three to her advantage. So much so that by the time she all but withdrew from Hollywood at age 28, she'd made close to 50 silent films and more than 10 talkies. The it girl phrase likewise has an interesting backstory. Writer Eleanor Glynn argued that any actress said to have it would be steeped not only in sex appeal but a winning lack of both self-consciousness and vanity. Then Paramount made a film of Glynn's novella It with Bow in the lead role, and thereafter the red-haired starlet was known as the It Girl. Later, countless young actresses would be labeled as such and would find out the hard way, as Clara Bow did, that having the elusive it factor could prove both a blessing and a curse. The Flapper Wars. Clara Bow was one of the first actresses to portray a so-called flapper on the big screen and by doing so, earned herself a stable of rivals, including Colleen Moore and Louise Brooks. Flappers emerged in the 1920s in part as a reaction to Prohibition and quickly became emblematic of the so-called Jazz Age, an era of excess and free love. And F. Scott Fitzgerald. With their tight dresses and bobbed hair and tendency to dance on tables, flappers horrified the prudish American establishment. They also made for fantastic movie fodder, and Clara Bow became a household name, thanks primarily to her portrayal of free living and stubbornly boisterous flappers in films like The Plastic Age and The Dancing Mothers. She also earned herself a frenemy in fellow flapper Colleen Moore, who reportedly so resented sharing the screen with Bow in the film Painted People that she made sure to cut Bow out of all the film's close-ups. Bow quit the movie after 3 weeks of filming in order to have sinus surgery, and that put its distribution way behind schedule. It's possible Bow's decision to bow out of the film was completely innocent. It's also possible that it was her way of getting even. Clara Bow was many things, but Shrinking Violet was not one of them. Clara Bow didn't look for wedding rings. Either Clara Bow didn't look for wedding rings, or she totally did and the looking was part of the fun. Bow was infamous in Hollywood for her many conquests and complete lack of sexual shyness. She even went so far as to make sure there were no restrictive morals clauses in any of her contracts. During her short but incredibly prolific career, Bow was romantically linked to a number of her co-stars, including Gary Cooper, Gilbert Roland, and Bela Lugosi, and she sometimes strung along 3 men at a time. At the height of her fame, she got engaged to 5 men in as many years. In one of her more infamous episodes, she flirted scandalously with a married ex-judge at a party thrown by B.P. Schulberg, the president of Paramount Pictures. The judge, who had lost his seat for coming out in favor of premarital sex, was at the party as a journalist to interview Bow for Vanity Fair. Clara greeted the judge with a kiss in front of his wife, no less, and then pulled him onto the dance floor, where she proceeded to unzip his pants. The judge was taken aback by her forwardness, but Bow, in typical no-nonsense fashion, questioned his cred if he likes all that modern stuff. How come he's such an old stick in the mud? Nothing, not wives, not rings could stop Clara Bow from living her best life. Clara Bow mothered her own mother. Bow spent much of her rough and tumble childhood tending to her mother, Sarah, whom Clara idolized even though she was an embittered, mentally ill epileptic. According to a 3-part interview Bow gave Photoplay magazine in 1928, Sarah was a beautiful and tragically unhappy woman who hated the often ugly and circumspect days she spent in a Brooklyn tenement. Prior to Clara's birth, Sarah lost 2 children. She reportedly tried to throw one of the dead bodies right into the trash. Clara was forced into the role of nursemaid from a young age, and she lived in fear that her mother would die in front of her during a seizure. Sarah Bow's delusions got worse over time, and her young daughter's forays into acting and show business deeply disturbed her. In the Photoplay interview, Bow said that at one point her mother put a knife to her throat and claimed that movies were evil. Sarah thought it her duty to end her daughter's life so she would sin no more. Clara divided her teen years between running to auditions and tending to her mother, and she was on a film set when her father broke the news of Sarah's death in a mental institution at the age of 43. Despite the fact that Sarah was often cruel to her, the loss of her mother was a devastating blow, and during the funeral Clara Bow tried to throw herself into her mother's grave. From abuser to manager, Clara Bow's father was, by all accounts, a drunk, philandering, ne'er-do-well who would often beat Clara as a way to end a fight with her mother. Clara, though, loved him unconditionally. In her telling, he was a brilliant man who couldn't catch a break, and the family had to move from one cramped apartment to another, often forced to rely on the kindness of relatives for shelter, clothing, and food. Later, as his daughter's beauty and talent became apparent, Robert Bow pushed her into show business, often against the wishes of his wife. Clara told Photoplay magazine that he wanted Clara to pursue acting because, as he saw it, it was no more dangerous than office work. As Clara Bow's career began to take off, she trusted her financial affairs to her former hairdresser and friend, Daisy DeVoe. Clara began to suspect that DeVoe might not have her best interests at heart, though, especially when DeVoe began bad-mouthing Robert. Then Robert flew out from New York to Los Angeles to be with Clara, and while she planned to give him the cold shoulder, she couldn't. She melted in his presence, happy to be among her people again, and he soon became her de facto manager. Perhaps it's not shocking that Robert Bow then used his daughter's fame to try to pick up girls, telling anyone he could that he was Clara Bow's father and capitalizing on her appeal to the last. Clara Bow made 15 films in 1 year. At the outset of her career, Clara Bow's flame burned bright, so bright in fact, that she appeared in 15 films in 1925 alone. 3 years later, she received 33,727 fan letters in 1 month, an industry record and perhaps, according to the Washington Post, a human one as well. Bow's appeal was many-faceted. In accordance with the writer Eleanor Glynn's definition of it, Bow appealed to both men and women. She exuded fun, excitement, and spontaneity in addition to having the ideal flapper face and figure. She was impossible to resist on camera. Off camera, she was 100% real at all times. Take, for instance, her response to one of her more famous breakups, "I cannot marry Harry Richmond as I am expecting a nervous breakdown." Many of the movies she made in 1925 are forgettable. See The Lawful Cheater, a crime drama about a gang of misfit crooks who see the error of their ways, and Parisian Love, in which Bow's character claims to be of the Apache Nation, but several are enduring artifacts of a time and aesthetic she helped shape. How Clara Bow inspired Betty Boop and started a henna craze. Clara Bow's hourglass figure and natural exuberance on screen were, in part, the inspiration for Max Fleischer's animated temptress, Betty Boop. The other women who gave Fleischer the idea for Betty Boop included the African-American cabaret singer Baby Esther Jones and Helen Kane, a popular white singer at the time. It was Betty Boop's unapologetically sexy nature and her refusal to give in to the uptight mores of her time that perhaps owe the most to Clara Bow, who was likewise staunch in her insistence on being herself always, no matter who it might offend or inconvenience. Women all over America wanted to emulate Bow's devil-may-care attitude, and they wanted to look like her too. When it got out to the movie-going public that Bow had red hair, there was a run on henna hair dye. So many bottles were bought up, in fact, many stores ran out. It all came as a surprise to Bow, who grew up thinking of her Titian orange-brown locks as a handicap. Clara Bow's husband ran for the House of Representatives. Bow eventually retreated from Hollywood to live on a Nevada ranch with her husband, Rex Bell, also a former actor. Then Bell tried to drag her into public life again when he ran for the U.S. House of Representatives in 1944. Bow had been hounded by the press for several years at this point. She was finished with fame and disgusted with the press, who, at the height of her career, slung mud at her from all sides, painting her as a drunken sex maniac who slept with her own dog. When Rex announced his campaign, Bow attempted suicide. She had taken an excessive amount of sleeping pills, and her sons found her unconscious on the floor of their house. Despite the very real and sad drama surrounding his wife, Bell went on to make a career out of politics, and a decade after his first campaign, he was lieutenant governor of Nevada. By that time though, he and Clara were living apart, she in a bungalow, close to her California psychiatrist, and he in Nevada with a blonde divorcee 10 years Clara's junior. Bao and Belle were still married, and they had 2 sons together. However, Belle ended their relationship when he became a politician. It was a sad end to a romance that began when Bao and Belle, whose real name was George Belden, met on the set of True to the Navy in 1930. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Like mother, like daughter. Clara Bao's husband, Rex Bell, ended up confining her to a sanatorium, just like her father had done to her mother and her grandfather had done to her grandmother before her. The series of breakdowns that Clara Bao experienced began just before she left Hollywood. Clara Bao's roller coaster personal life and struggles with mental illness earned her the cold nickname Crisis de Clara, but that was an unfeeling industry placing blame where it didn't belong. It's likely that Bao suffered from schizophrenia, which can develop later in life, and that her mother did as well. Her grandmother was driven mad by her husband's constant beatings, according to David Sten's Clara Bao Runnin' Wild. And when a census worker came to Bao's grandparents' house to survey the household, her grandfather locked his wife up in a closet and claimed to be a widower. Many critics assumed that Clara Bao's career was torpedoed by the advent of talkies and her strong Brooklyn accent. She'd obviously flourished as a silent movie star, so that was a natural assumption. And Jean Hagen's broad but hilarious turn as Lena Lamont in Singin' in the Rain is a send-up of Clara Bao and her fall from grace. In reality, though, Bao was sidelined not by her lower-class roots but by mental illness and a burning desire to escape the glare of the spotlight. Clara Bao started poor, got rich, then ran into money trouble. Clara Bao grew up impoverished, often wearing her mother's old worn-out shirtwaist dresses done over and going hungry night after night. When asked to elaborate on her youth and life with her parents, she said, "We just lived, and that's about all." It's no surprise then that when she got a taste of fame and money, she didn't always manage it well. Gambling debts and even rumors of debts followed her everywhere. In September 1930, Clara Bao's alleged debts caught up with her to the point that executives with Paramount Pictures felt a response was needed. B.P. Schulberg, Paramount president, told the Cornell Daily Sun that reports of Bao's owing almost $14,000 to a Lake Tahoe casino were not the studio's problem but Bao's alone. The scandal didn't just implicate Bao, though. Will Rogers, the comedian cowboy from Oklahoma, was seen having dinner with Bao and her then-boyfriend, Rex Bell, the night Bao supposedly ran up the debts. Rogers was also rumored to have introduced Bao to James McKay, the owner of the casino in question. Bao denied the story, saying she always paid her debts promptly. Rogers also denied it, saying he never gambled because everything was fixed for the house. Clara Bao and the Court of Public Opinion. In 1929, Daisy DeVoe, Clara Bao's hair stylist turned manager and supposedly best friend, tried to blackmail Bao by going public with scandalous reports of Bao's bad behavior. DeVoe accused Bao not only of drunkenness and loose morals but drug use and bestiality. There was talk at the time that Bao had an unusually close relationship with her dog. DeVoe's story, clearly a hit job from the beginning, gained credence when a Los Angeles-based tabloid, The Coast Reporter, took it up and devoted 60 pages to detailing Clara Bao's supposed exploits. The piece, entitled Clara's Secret Love Life as Told by Daisy, gave DeVoe, whose real name was DeVoe, a platform from which to spew ugly lies about Bao, already the subject of salacious Hollywood gossip. Robert Gurnaugh, publisher of The Coast Reporter, sent copies of the magazine to judges, PTAs, and the first president of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, hoping, as DeVoe obviously was, to cash in on Bao's vulnerabilities. He even tried selling the entire paper to Bao's husband, Rex Bell, for $25,000, but Bell refused to play his game. Gurnaugh eventually went to jail for sending lewd material through the mail. DeVoe, too, served time, 18 months to be exact, but not for extortion or being the world's worst best friend. For stealing Bao's fur coat. Clara Bao does the USC football team, not really. After Clara Bao moved to Los Angeles and became one of America's first and most beloved movie stars, People began spreading rumors that she often invited the entire University of Southern California football team over to her house for wild, out-of-control adult games. In his Tinseltown expose, Hollywood Babylon, Kenneth Anger joined the chorus, claiming that Bao had an insatiable appetite for fullbacks, halfbacks, and tight ends. However, like much of the gossip surrounding Bao's choices in the bedroom, this ridiculous story turned out to be completely false. It was true that Bao was a fervent supporter of USC football, and she did go on a date with Morley Drury, the team's star quarterback. However, Drury claims that Bao's house parties never went beyond eating and innocent flirting. The parties took place after each Trojan home game and included a little dancing but no hanky-panky. Clara Bao eventually moved the parties out of her house and into a hotel room on the insistence of her father, who, despite his own checkered past, worried about the impropriety of such events. Later she hosted the team once a year and then not at all. Clara Bao was an athlete and a tomboy. Clara Bao wasn't just a beautiful, talented, high-spirited actress. She was also a natural athlete. Growing up poor in Brooklyn, she gravitated to the boys in her neighborhood and school, eschewing dolls and pretty clothes in favor of games of stickball and impromptu foot races. In fact, that's where she claims to have gotten her long, toned legs from running. And she got her strong right arm from pitching to boys in the alleys. She used that arm to defend her first friend, a little boy named Johnny she used to walk to school with. Anytime Johnny got bullied, Clara Bao was right there, ready to throw down. In 1919, she enrolled in the Bay Ridge High School for girls, but she didn't fit in there. She didn't have the right look, the right clothes, or the right demeanor. She was so interested in sports as a teen that she planned to train as an athletics instructor. Her cousin Homer Baker, a U.S. national half-marathon champion, helped her win 5 medals on what she called the Cinder Tracks by inspiring and coaching her. Clara Bao, the original it girl of Hollywood, lived a life so full of contradiction, turmoil, and dazzling stardom that even the most die-hard film buffs can't help but gape in awe at the complicated, tragic, and revolutionary path she carved out for herself amid the glitz of early Tinseltown. And though she's often remembered only as a flirty flapper with a saucy grin, the truth is infinitely richer and more haunting, beginning with her birth in a gritty Brooklyn tenement at the dawn of the 20th century, where she emerged into a world not remotely prepared to handle the kind of fierce energy she would unleash. Raised in poverty by an epileptic, mentally ill mother who once pressed a knife to Clara's throat to stop her from sinning on screen, and a father who beat her and floated between jobs and mistresses, Clara was surrounded by instability and violence that would later erupt in destructive ways, but also forged her indomitable spirit and resilience, because even when she was tending to her mother's seizures or dodging her father's wrath, she clung to dreams of the silver screen with a desperation that would become prophetic. And when she entered a beauty contest that led to her first role in a film, Clara Bao didn't just act. She exploded, electrifying audiences with her expressive eyes and untamed physicality, becoming the embodiment of the flapper spirit as America reeled through the roaring 20s, a time of prohibition, jazz, and unprecedented female liberation, and no one embodied that seismic cultural shift more than Clara Bao, who by 1925 had starred in an astonishing 15 films in a single year, captivating a nation and igniting a media frenzy that would label her as the new feminine ideal, though that same press would gleefully destroy her only a few years later, a cycle of worship and scorn that still plagues celebrity culture today, especially for women. Dubbed the It Girl after starring in Paramount's 1927 film It, written by Eleanor Glynn, who defined it as that elusive magnetic quality of sex appeal, charm, and confidence without conceit, Clara became a national obsession, receiving tens of thousands of fan letters a month, being chased down city streets, and admired by moviegoers and industry insiders alike. Although behind the fame lay chaos, heartbreak, and an emotional instability that few knew how to help her manage. Because while Clara presented a picture of dazzling joy on screen, off-screen she was a deeply damaged woman haunted by childhood trauma, parental betrayal, and the pressures of instant superstardom, surrounded by backstabbing rivals like Colleen Moore and Louise Brooks, both of whom resented her raw sexuality and unpolished Brooklyn accent. And yet Clara never pretended to be anyone other than herself, rebuffing studio executives who tried to make her more ladylike or censor her uninhibited lifestyle, including her refusal to sign any contracts with morality clauses and her habit of dating multiple men simultaneously, counting among her lovers Gary Cooper, Bela Lugosi, Gilbert Roland, and countless unnamed suitors, once even unzipping a married ex-judge's pants in front of his wife at a party just to make a point about hypocrisy. And while these stories fed the gossip columns and titillated the public, they were often cruelly distorted or exaggerated by scandal-hungry tabloids, especially when her personal secretary Daisy DeVoe was tried for embezzlement and aired Clara's secrets in open court, fueling a media circus that portrayed Bao as a wild, immoral creature unfit for Hollywood, a characterization that devastated her and contributed to her decision to step back from the screen at the young age of 28, already disillusioned by betrayal, exhaustion, and the arrival of sound films, which brought with them a new kind of scrutiny and proved difficult for Bao, whose Brooklyn accent and microphone anxiety clashed with the technical demands of the talkies. And yet, even her brief foray into sound films was successful, with hits like Call Her Savage and Hoopla reminding audiences of her incomparable charisma. But by then Clara had retreated into domestic life with her husband, cowboy actor Rex Bell, with whom she had 2 children and settled on a ranch in Nevada where she tried desperately to find peace and anonymity, though mental health struggles, likely undiagnosed bipolar disorder, continued to plague her, compounded by a series of nervous breakdowns, electroshock treatments and institutionalizations that left her increasingly isolated until her death in 1965, aged just 60, far from the public spotlight that once defined her. And yet Clara Bao's legacy as the first true movie star of the modern age remains undeniable, a woman who defied the limitations of her birth, rewrote the rules of celebrity, and left an indelible mark not just on cinema but on the cultural fabric of a century, proving that while it may be hard to define, once you see it, you never forget it. And Clara Bao had it in spades, a legend forged not just in fame but in the fire of survival, rebellion, and a fierce authenticity that still inspires anyone who dares to challenge the world on their own terms.